industry. Well, we realize we're all one. It's gonna fuck up the economy. The economy that's fake anyway. Yeah. I just think it's interesting to see how people act on their beliefs, you know what I mean? Because all your beliefs, they're just that. They're nothing. They're how you were taught and raised. That doesn't make them real.
The moon rises in the east, arcs to the south, and disappears in the west every day. A motion oddly similar to that of the sun. And not just similar in motion, but also speed. It takes the moon about 25 hours to go all the way around the world, while it takes the sun about 24 hours. And the moon's light is not reflected sunlight. The moon is self-luminous. And light from the moon is cooling. And here we have a crescent moon setting on September 6th here in central Iowa. And here it is again, sped up a little. One thing I thought was interesting from this particular footage was how the daylight dissipated to the northwest, as if the light and electrification of the sky was following the direction the sun was headed, as the moon does. And here we are, same shot, zoomed in. Now, when I am seeing the moon set here in Iowa, is when someone in New Zealand would be seeing the moon in their daytime sky. Now, New Zealand is 17 hours ahead of Iowa, so my Sunday night is New Zealand's Monday midday. So if the moon set in Iowa at 9:03 and it rose in New Zealand at 8:08, that means while I was watching the moon set, it had already risen for an observer in New Zealand, as you can see here with the computer model. And here is footage of the moon set on September 7th here in Iowa. And here is the moon set from September 8th. And after I filmed the September 8th moon set, I contacted friend of the show and fellow skywatcher Chris Cooper of Taranaki, New Zealand. And Chris was able to get out and snap a picture of the moon as he saw it from there in New Zealand on that day. And the sun and the moon are so close to each other this time of the month, Chris was almost able to get both of them in one frame. And here are Chris's photos from Taranaki, New Zealand. And these were taken just a few hours after I finished filming the moon here in Iowa. You can see the moon just barely keeping up with the daylight, just as I observed in Iowa. And so my observations in Iowa agree with Chris Cooper's observations in New Zealand. Plug these in to the moon charts and this here computer model, and everything is very clock-like. And next we will be taking a look at a handful of moonrises to show that the resemblance between a moonrise and a sunrise is uncanny. Here we have a full moon emerging not from the vanishing point, but from some clouds on the horizon. And as you can see, it seems to change color, size, and altitude as it arcs to the south. However, those are optical illusions, and as the moon lurches near the observer, its appearance does stabilize. And next are a handful of videos showing the moon's self-luminous nature. Here we can see as the daylight dissipates, the moonlight increases. So if the moon was just a dusty, dirty ball and all that light we see was reflected sunlight, why does the moon get brighter as the daylight dissipates? And shots like these, we can see the moon illuminating just the clouds around it. Again, clearly showing that it is not sunlight coming in from the northwest. And again, with this sequence of shots, the sunlight moves out of sight, the daylight dissipates, and the moonlight increases. And again, the same thing with these moon sets. The daylight dissipates and the moon gets brighter, clearly showing that the moon's luminosity is not reflected sunlight or daylight. So, what is the moon? How big is the moon? How far away is the moon? How is the moon's motion explained in relation to the sun's, or the moon's phases, and the explanation we are given for how the moon phases work? I highly recommend people take a second look at the science, the explanations given to us for these things. I recommend people take another look at this now that they aren't in first grade, now that they aren't sitting in front of the evening news with their parents, and just take a look at some of these explanations for how this stuff works with the moon, and just ask if it makes any sense at all. Because the reality is, when you start to scientifically investigate the moon, you find everything you will find will be at odds with the explanation given to us from institutions like NASA, evening news, and your weathermen. And like many things, the more you learn you don't know. However, if you start to think and talk to other people who independently study the moon, and you start filming the moon over long periods of time, you you will start to learn things, and it will be at odds with what you've been told your whole life. You as an individual have a choice then. Do you accept what nature and the scientific method tells you? Or do you go along with the belief system that has been ingrained in you since you were young? And so what do I think the moon is? Well, it should go without saying that there's still a lot of mysteries, and no one should take my explanation or anyone's explanation without doing their own looking, learning for themselves. So what is the moon? I don't know. But if I was pressed to ask, if I pressed myself to try and make some kind of presentation to try and help people learn about the moon, I would say something like, the moon is a holographic plasma projection.